She was supposed to accept the offering, smile for the village, and trade her life for her grandmother's safety. But in front of everyone, Ha'an said no. One word turned the richest family in town against her. One refusal gave her 30 days to repay a debt she could never afford. And one forgotten notebook by the river revealed the truth her father left behind. They thought poverty would make her kneel. They were wrong. The offering left by the river. Chapter 1. The offering not accepted. On the morning before the engagement ceremony, Bing Hua's riverside lay under a thin veil of mist, like an old scarf pulled across the roofs. Ha-An stood beneath the eaves, listening to the distant cough of a motorboat and to her grandmother's cough inside the room. On the peeling wooden table, the ceremonial trays sent by the Tron family before dawn were covered in red cloth, tied with yellow bows, and arranged so heavily that the small house suddenly felt crowded. Neighbors passing by turned their heads. Some called it great fortune, others sighed and said a poor girl noticed by a rich family was a once-in-a-lifetime matter. In the scent of betel, areca, and medicinal wine, Ha-An smelled only the young mud of a flood season coming near. Mrs. Lam sat with her back against the wall, her white hair tied neatly behind her neck. She did not force her grandmother, but her eyes carried a fatigue that made every unspoken word heavier. Her medical debt, the cost of repairing the roof after the storm, and the loan paper bearing Mr. V's red stamp had all lain in the cabinet like stones. The Tron family never said plainly that the engagement gift was a way to settle the debt, but everyone understood. Mr. V owned the cold storage warehouse across the river. He had land, cars, and a voice people listened to at the district market. His son, Chan Kan, was handsome, educated in the city, neatly dressed, and always looked at people as if he were weighing their price. Ha-An had once thought she could endure a look like that in exchange for peace for her grandmother. But last night, while cleaning out her father's desk drawer, she found a blue notebook with mold at the edges. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving behind a leaking house, a strip of land beside the old ferry landing, and pages of notes about the free class he had once opened for poor children. Among the yellowed sheets, one line kept Ha-An sitting awake until nearly dawn. The ferry landing land is not to be sold or pledged for debt. It is a place for those without a road to learn how to cross the river. Her father's words held no magic, yet they woke in her a sharp sense of shame. If she accepted today's offering only because she was afraid, she would be closing with her own hands the one door her father had kept open for her. When the lucky hour arrived, the yard filled with people. The trays were carried in, cameras clicked, and the women from the Tron side laughed in bright, sharp voices. Kong stood beside his father, his white shirt perfectly pressed, holding a bouquet of roses as if it were a contract already signed. Mr. V spoke about destiny, about two families helping each other through hardship, about how after the wedding he would send workers to repair the house and take Mrs. Lam to the provincial hospital for treatment. Every word sounded decent, but Ha-An heard behind it the right to decide in her place. When the matchmaker brought the beetle tray forward, the whole yard fell silent, awaiting for her to bow her head and accept it. Ha-An placed her hand on the edge of the tray and felt the cool beetle leaves beneath her fingers. She looked at her grandmother, then at her father's photograph on the altar, then out toward the river landing. The tide was low, exposing strips of black mud and rotting wooden stakes. She suddenly understood that if she kept letting others pull her life along, she would become like an unmoored boat, drifting anywhere as long as it did not sink in plain view. She drew a breath. Her voice trembled, but it was clear. "I am sorry to both families. I cannot accept this offering." The electric fan inside the house suddenly sounded absurdly loud. A child at the gate dropped a piece of candy, and the plastic struck the tile with a dry little sound, like a period at the end of a sentence. Mr. V's face changed first. He kept smiling, but the smile thinned like paper soaked with water. Kang looked at her with more anger than surprise, as if an item he had ordered had expectedly learned to answer for itself. Relatives whispered. An aunt from the Tron side said girls these days had hardly studied anything and already acted proud, poor yet picky. Mrs. Lam braced her hands and stood, her legs shaking, but she did not pull her granddaughter down to apologize. She only asked softly, "Have you thought it through?" Ha-An nodded. She knew this answer would make the roof leak more, the meals smaller, the gossip longer, But for the first time in many years, she heard her own voice without it being swallowed by someone else's. Mr. V stepped forward and placed a red envelope on the table. "A debt is still a debt," he said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "If the relationship is not formed, the papers remain. I give your family 30 days. Then he turned and told his people to carry the trays back out. The red trays were lifted and moved backward through the yard like a line of boats leaving the landing. Hang was the last to go. Before reaching the gate, he leaned close to Ha-an and said under his breath, "You will regret making me lose face." Ha-an did not answer. She only gripped the blue notebook in her pocket until her nails hurt against the hard cover. By evening, the house was empty again. The neighbors had dispersed, but their comments lingered like cooking smoke. Mrs. Lamb sat picking up fallen areca petals, breathing between each movement. Ha-an knelt beside her, wanting to apologize, but her throat had tightened shut. Her grandmother laid a hand on her head, as gently as if touching a feverish child. "If you refused, then you must live worthy of that refusal. No one can eat for you, and no one can bear humiliation for you." Outside, the river began to rise. Ha-an watched the small waves touch the bank and knew the next 30 days would stretch as long as another life.
Chapter 2. The Price of Saying No. By the next morning, Binhua Market knew the story before Ha-an had fully opened her eyes. News moved faster than floodwater. The poor girl had returned the rich family's engagement gifts. Mr. V was furious. Her sick grandmother lay at home, and the 30-day debt was about to close in. When Ha-an went to the market to buy rice on credit, the stall owner who had once known her father suddenly became busy arranging sacks and would not look directly at her. The fish sellers lowered their voices when she passed, then giggled after she was gone. No one insulted her openly, but avoidance could sting more than scolding. It made her realize that the right to refuse did not come with the right to be left in peace. One no could open a door, but it could also make every familiar road narrow at once. At home, Mrs. Lamb searched through her medicine packets and counted the leftover money in a tin box. Ha-an pretended not to see the pills broken in half so they would last longer. She went through the neighborhood asking for work, washing dishes at food stalls, helping with sewing, keeping records at the rice warehouse. Every place shook its head, not always because they did not need help, but because no one wanted trouble with Mr. V. By afternoon, she reached the old ferry landing, where her father had once built a classroom under a tin roof with second-hand desks and benches. Since the concrete bridge was finished, the ferry landing had emptied. The storehouse beside it was locked, weeds climbing over the doorstep. Only the wind through the plank gaps sounded like someone turning pages. The key to the storehouse still hung behind her father's altar. Ha-an opened the door, and dust rose so thickly that she coughed. Inside were a blackboard cracked at one corner, several crates of old textbooks, a broken printer, and the long, damp smell of paper. She pulled away a tarp and saw that her father's chalk writing was still on the wall. To cross a river, you need more than a boat. You must know which bank you want to reach. She laughed, and then the tears came before she knew it. While the whole village thought she had just cut off her own way to survive, this old storehouse looked like a forgotten path. It could not pay the debt at once, but it could give her something with which to begin. Mai, Ha-an's closest friend since high school, arrived while she was sweeping cobwebs. Mai sold sugarcane juice at the market. Her mouth moved faster than her hands, but her kindness needed no decoration. The moment she stepped inside, she scolded. "If you were going to refuse, you should have asked me to stand behind you and make it look impressive." Ha-an smiled wearily. The two sat on a crate of books and shared a cold loaf of bread. Mai listened as Ha-an told her about the 30 days and her father's notebook, and her face turned serious. "Then open the class again," Mai said. "The children here still need someone to tutor them. I sell juice during the day. At night I can help you collect whatever fee people can give. No money? Then rice or eggs. Survive first. The debt can be calculated after that."
Chapter 2. The Price of Saying No. By the next morning, Binhua Market knew the story before Ha-an had fully opened her eyes. News moved faster than floodwater. The poor girl had returned the rich family's engagement gifts, Mr. V was furious, her sick grandmother lay at home, and the 30-day debt was about to close in. When Ha-an went to the market to buy rice on credit, the stall-owner who had once known her father suddenly became busy arranging sacks and would not look directly at her. The fish sellers lowered their voices when she passed, then giggled after she was gone. No one insulted her openly, but avoidance could sting more than scolding. It made her realize that the right to refuse did not come with the right to be left in peace. One no could open a door, but it could also make every familiar road narrow at once. At home, Mrs. Lam searched through her medicine packets and counted the leftover money in a tin box. Ha-an pretended not to see the pills broken in half so they would last longer. She went through the neighborhood asking for work, washing dishes at food stalls, helping with sewing, keeping records at the rice warehouse. Every place shook its head, not always because they did not need help, but because no one wanted trouble with Mr. V. By afternoon, she reached the old ferry landing, where her father had once built a classroom under a tin roof with second-hand desks and benches. Since the concrete bridge was finished, the ferry landing had emptied. The storehouse beside it was locked, weeds climbing over the doorstep. Only the wind through the plank gaps sounded like someone turning pages. The key to the storehouse still hung behind her father's altar. Ha-an opened the door, and dust rose so thickly that she coughed. Inside were a blackboard cracked at a corner, several crates of old textbooks, a broken printer, and the long, damp smell of paper. She pulled away a tarp and saw that her father's chalk writing was still on the wall. To cross a river, you need more than a boat. You must know which bank you want to reach. She laughed, and then the tears came before she knew it. While the whole village thought she had just cut off her own way to survive, this old storehouse looked like a forgotten path. It could not pay the debt at once, but it could give her something with which to begin. The idea sounded naive, but inside that naivety was a force that pushed her forward. Ha-an wrote a notice in marker. Evening class at the ferry landing. Math, Vietnamese, reading. Fee by goodwill. She taped the paper at Mai's drink stall, to the tree by the communal house, and in front of the primary school. That evening, only 2 children came, little T, son of the vegetable seller, and Nak, who often missed school to watch her younger sibling. They sat one broken desk apart, looking at her with curiosity and caution. Ha-an held the chalk, her hand still weak from hunger and fatigue, but when she wrote the first addition problem on the board, she felt a strange steadiness rise inside her. News that the class had reopened brought Mr. V's people faster than she expected. The visitor was Uncle Sao Tam, the man who handled paperwork errands for Mr. V. He had a round belly and a gold ring on his finger. He stood outside the storehouse door and did not step in, as if poverty's dust would cling to his leather sandals. "Miss Anne," he said, "Mr. V asked me to remind you, this plot is part of the collateral file. You should not gather people here. If legal trouble happens, it will be inconvenient." Ha-an set the chalk down and asked to see the file. Mr. Sao Tam smiled. "You are young. Seeing papers will make no difference. You have 30 days. Worry about money, not words." That sentence struck the most painful place in her. That night, after the students had gone home, Ha-an opened the blue notebook again. Besides class notes, her father had tucked inside old receipts, names of borrowers and payers, and the names of households that had once contributed money to build the landing. One smudged sheet recorded Mrs. Lam's loan after surgery, but beside it was the line, "Settled by compensation for rice field land." If that was true, the debt Mr. V might hold might not be as whole as he claimed. But the papers lacked stamps, signatures, and all the things poor people often lack when facing someone with a large desk. Ha-an folded the papers back and saw that what lay before her was not only a debt, but a maze. Mrs. Lam was not surprised when she heard. She said that when her father was alive, he had once argued with Mr. V about selling the ferry landing ground for a floating restaurant project. After that, her father became seriously ill, and the matter sank out of sight. "Some things people wait to take until they see you are weak," she said. Ha-an sat quietly under the yellow lamp, listening to insects outside the yard. She had thought refusing the engagement offering was a reckless act of pride. Now she understood it was only the first cut into a net that had long been wrapped around her family. To escape, she would have to learn how to read every knot of the net, not simply yank and hope it would tear.
Chapter 3. The Storehouse by the Ferry. 1 week later, the evening class had 13 students. The rumors remained poisonous, but children cared less about adult honor than about having a place to do homework and a working fan. Ha-an repaired a light bulb, asked for old plastic chairs, and wiped mold from each book. Mai brought leftover sugarcane juice. Fook, the mechanic, brought an outlet and extension cord, and Miss Ha from the primary school sent a stack of practice tests. The storehouse by the ferry slowly changed from dust and wind into reading voices, laughter, and chalk tapping the board.
Every night when she closed the door, Ha-on counted the fees in a plastic box. The amount was almost laughably small, but it was money she had earned by not bowing her head. Zui appeared on the 8th evening, just as the first rain of the season hammered the tin roof. He was tall and thin, wore glasses, and had a shirt damp at the shoulders. In his arms he carried a box of books wrapped in plastic. After a few seconds, Ha-on recognized him, Nguyen Min Zui, one of her father's former students, the boy her father had once lent books to so he could take the university entrance exam before disappearing to the city. Zui set the box down and smiled awkwardly. "I heard Teacher Locke's class had reopened. I came back too late." Inside the box were reference books, children's stories, dictionaries, and an old laptop. Ha-on wanted to say thank you, but only asked, "How did you know?" Zui looked at the writing on the board and answered, "There are places we leave for a long time and still owe a return." Zui's presence changed the class quickly. He repaired the printer, reinstalled the laptop, taught the children how to search for lessons, and drew a small income and expense board to hang by the door. At first, Ha-on was irritated because everything he did was neat, as if the storehouse were a project that needed management. Yet she had to admit he saw gaps she had tried to ignore: electricity fees, paper costs, study hours, attendance lists, parent agreements. "If you want to keep this place for the long term, you need to turn kindness into a model that can stand," Zui said. Ha-on snapped back. "You people from the city like giving pretty names to everything. Here, people only ask if there is money at the end of the month." Zui did not take offense. "Then we start with that question," he said. They divided the work. Ha-on taught and spoke with parents. Zui repaired the storehouse and wrote a proposal called the Ferry Landing Bookshelf to submit to the commune for recognition as a community activity. Mai helped collect fees, recording every payment clearly. For the first time, Ha-on saw that even a small effort could have a backbone if the people doing it were willing to put it on paper. She thought of her father, who had always written everything into notebooks. Before, she thought he was too careful, leaving receipts all over a poor life. Now she understood that writing was how the weak kept their footprints. Without paper, every promise could be retold by someone else in the version that suited them best.
Kong came to the class on a blazing afternoon. He drove his car all the way to the landing, wearing dark glasses and an expensive polo shirt, holding a folder of documents. The children, who had been reading aloud together, fell silent. Kong looked around the cleaned-up storehouse, his gaze passing over Du before stopping on Ha-on. "You seem busy," he said. "I came to offer the final option. My father does not want this to become ugly. Sign over the landing land, the debt disappears, and your grandmother's hospital fees will be covered. You can also stop pretending to be a hero in this rotten storehouse." Ha-on took the folder. The first page was an agreement with a figure larger than any sum she had ever seen, large enough that, if she signed, she could escape poverty immediately. Du stood behind her without interfering. At the door, Mai gripped a cup of sugarcane juice so hard it dented. Ha-on read line by line and realized that the land listed in the documents included the storehouse, the path down to the landing, and a piece of garden behind Mrs. Lamb's house. She asked, "If this is only to clear a debt, why do you need the whole ferry landing?" Kong smiled thinly. "Because you are incapable of making use of it. Land has value only in the hands of people who know business." Ha-on returned the folder. "Some things are not for sale just because they have a price." Kong's face darkened. He bent closer, his voice cold. "You are using a few children as a screen for your pride. When the enforcement notice comes, do not say I did not give you a way out." That night, Ha-on did not sleep. The number in the documents kept flashing before her like car headlights sweeping across a wall. She knew she was not so noble that she could not be shaken. Her grandmother coughed more often. The roof still leaked, and some days there was barely a meal. One signature could buy medicine, rice, and silence from the market. But when she imagined the storehouse flattened to build a restaurant, her father's sentence gone beneath glossy tiles, and the children sitting on the roadside to do homework, her throat closed. Perhaps becoming an adult did not mean no longer fearing poverty. Perhaps it meant knowing which fear must not be allowed to drive. The next morning, Du took her to the district archive office. He knew a friend who worked with records, but knowing someone only got them seats in a cooler hallway. It did not make the file open itself. They filled forms, copied identity papers, requested land extracts, and asked for copies of old compensation records. The clerk behind the counter looked at the papers and said they lacked commune confirmation. Back at the commune, officials said they needed the district extract first. The administrative circle exhausted Ha'an. Ju bought her a bottle of water and said quietly, "People often defeat the poor by making them tired before they can prove they are right." Ha'an looked at the long row of plastic chairs and found that the sentence did not discourage her. It woke her up.
Chapter 4. The Debt Book and the Map. On the 14th day of the 30-day deadline, Ha'an found the map. It had been caught between two pages stuck together by damp, no bigger than her hand, drawn in blue ink to show the old ferry landing. In one corner were her father's signature and an unfamiliar name, Lei Kwang Ting. Mrs. Lam stared at the name for a long time before remembering that Mr. Ting had once chaired the cooperative and served as a witness when villagers contributed land to open the path down to the landing. After retiring, he had moved to town to live with his daughter. "If he still keeps any papers," she said, "you may find the roots." Ha'an slipped the map into her pocket as if it were a live coal. The town was more than 20 kilometers from Binghua. Ha'an rode Fuchs' motorbike while Ju sat behind her, holding the file bag so it would not fly open. Mr. Ting's house stood in an alley with purple bougainville, quiet enough for the sound of sandals on the floor to be heard clearly. He was past 70, with cloudy eyes, but when he heard her father's name, he straightened. "Locke? That boy was stubborn, but he loved the children," he said. Ha'an showed him the map. His hand shook when he touched the paper. He explained that the ferry landing had been formed from many families' land, and Ha'an's family owned only one part. After the bridge was built, Mr. Vai wanted to gather the land for a project, but her father objected because there was a clause saying community use land could not be privately transferred. Mr. Ting searched his cabinet for a long time. Old files tied with brittle rubber bands had turned yellow where they had once been white. At last he took out a copy of a village meeting record listing the contributing households and a note. "The storehouse area, path to the landing, and front yard of the ferry landing are to be used as a learning and gathering point and as flood relief shelter. Not to be included in private transactions without community approval." The red stamp had faded but was still visible. Ha'an read it again and again, her heart beating harder than to ache. This was not victory yet, but it was proof that she was not merely holding on to a memory. She was holding part of a promise made by the whole village, a promise that time and money had made people forget. On the way back, rain chased them. Ju drove slowly because the road was slick. Ha'an hugged the file bag to her chest, cold and wet outside, burning inside. She thought of the past days when she had begged for odd jobs, begged for signatures, begged for a fair glance. Perhaps poverty was not only the lack of money, it was also the lack of evidence to defend what one knew was right. Over the wind, Ju said, "We need certified copies, witnesses, and we need to bring this to a public village meeting before they submit an enforcement file." Ha'an asked, "What if they say the old papers are no longer valid?" Ju answered, "Then we make them say that in front of everyone who contributed the land." But Mr. Vai did not wait for them to be ready. That very evening, Uncle Sao Tom brought a notice to the house demanding that Ha'an pay the debt, including principal, interest, and added costs. The amount had swollen to twice its size. Mrs. Lam turned pale as she looked at the paper. Ha'an asked how the interest had been calculated. Uncle Sao Tom shrugged. "It is written in the contract. If you did not read it, that is not our fault." Dwi looked it over and pointed out several irregularities, but the man only smiled. "If you want to sue, go ahead. Do you have money for court fees?" The question left the house silent. Justice on paper sounded beautiful, but to touch it, one still had to buy a ticket through the gate. Ha'an did not cry in front of Uncle Sao Tom. She waited until he left, then sat down on the floor. Mrs. Lam held her hand, the thin bones cold. "Maybe we should sell the back house," her grandmother whispered. Ha'an shook her head. "If you sell, where will you live?" Mrs. Lam gave a sad smile. "Anywhere is fine, as long as you do not suffer." That sentence hurt Ha'an more than any threat. She had once thought family was the reason she should accept sacrifice, but if sacrifice meant turning herself into someone with no right to choose, was the peace left behind truly peace? She held her grandmother, listening to rain drum on the tin roof, and for the first time wanted to be angry instead of only enduring. Mai proposed a fundraising reading night. At first, the idea sounded like a children's game, but as Mai spoke, her eyes shone. "Each family brings something. The kids read poems, Miss Ha gives a talk, Dwi prints invitations. We are not begging for money to pay a debt. We are asking people to stand with this landing. Ha-an understood the difference immediately. She had tried so hard to prove she was not pitiful that she had forgotten community did not exist only when one knelt down to ask. If the ferry landing had once belonged to many people, then this fight should not belong to her alone. She agreed, though Mr. Vi would hear and try to interfere. That night, Ha-an wrote invitations by hand to every parent, every person who had studied with her father, every boat owner, and every household that had once contributed land. Dwi sat opposite her, revising the typed version on his laptop and looking up now and then to suggest a sentence. In the letters, Ha-an did not say she had been cornered by debt or complain about poverty. She wrote about the storehouse, about children needing a place to learn, about the flood season needing a shelter, and about an old commitment many people might have forgotten. When she finished the last letter, her hand ached, but her heart felt lighter. Some lives do not change direction because of one dazzling event. They change because someone finally dares to name what she wants to protect.
Chapter 5. The Class with the Lights On. The reading night took place on Saturday under a tin roof patched in uneven pieces. Mai strung yellow lights from the storehouse door to the yard. Fook borrowed a portable speaker. Miss Ha brought sticky rice cakes, and parents brought bananas, sweet potatoes, and bean dessert. Ha-an wore her mother's old blue aljai, its cuffs slightly frayed, but as she stood before the board, she no longer felt like the girl who had returned an engagement offering in the middle of her own yard. More than 50 people faced her. Children, elders, a few market stall owners, and even people who had avoided her gaze at the market. They could have come out of curiosity or respect for her father. At least they had stepped into the storehouse before it was turned into a number in a contract. Little T read first. He held his paper so tightly that the words seemed to shake with him, reading an essay about the old road to school across the ferry landing as his mother remembered it. He misread a few words. The class laughed, and he blushed, but Ha-an clapped first, and everyone followed. After him, Nak told the story of wanting to become a nurse so her grandmother would not have to travel far for treatment. Children's words were not as sharp as legal files, but they could touch the tender places adults often hid. Ha-an saw several parents lower their heads. Perhaps they remembered a time when they, too, had needed a study lamp and someone willing to sit beside them until division no longer felt frightening. Dwi presented the bookshelf plan in a calm voice, the number of students, the schedule, the expenses, the management method, and the plan to request books and equipment. He did not speak much about Mr. V, but he placed a copy of the village meeting record on the table for anyone who wished to see it. Clarity had its own strength. It turned the story from that stubborn Ha-an girl into this ferry landing once carried a promise. When Mr. Ting's daughter brought him in, the whole yard stirred. He stood with his cane and said slowly that the signature on the paper was real, that Ha-an's father had not kept the land for his family alone, and that the old are at fault for letting the young dig up their memory like water from a dry well. No one expected Kang to come as well. He stood at the edge of the yard without entering, but his car parked under the tamarind tree drew every eye. Ha-an saw him in the mixed light and shadow, his face unreadable. The fundraising continued, but the air tightened. After the readings, Mai carried the donation box around. Some people dropped in 10,000 dong, some 50, and some only signed their names in support. A fish seller who had once spoken badly of Ha-an pushed a few market-scented bills into her hand and said bluntly, "I did not study well, but my grandchild needs to." Ha-an bowed in thanks, her throat closing. Kindness, even when it arrives late, can still make a person want to cry.
At the end of the evening, Kang stepped inside. He did not look at the crowd, only at Ha-an. "You are making this bigger than necessary," he said. Dwi started to rise, but Ha-an signaled that he should not. She asked Kang what he wanted. He placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of the debt contract, bearing Mrs. Lamb's signature, along with an interest appendix. "I remind you that a few stories and an emotional performance do not erase a legal obligation," Ha-an answered, "just as a few irregular interest papers do not erase a community commitment." Kang looked at her, and this time his eyes held more than contempt. There was a flicker of confusion, as if he had never met someone who refused to enter the role he had written for her. Mr. Tin spoke before the confrontation became an argument.
He said that if the Tran family believed its file was correct, they should agree to a public meeting at the commune office with representatives of the households that had contributed land. Kang gave a cold smile, but could not refuse in front of so many people. He said he would relay the message. After he left, Mai exhaled, and Fook muttered under his breath. Ha-an did not feel lighter. She knew that the evening had only given her more witnesses, not a victory. But in a fight against people with money, being seen was a step toward survival. Those used to working in darkness hate it most when someone turns on the lights. After everyone went home, Ha-an counted the money with Mai. The total was only enough to pay part of the medicine and electric bills, but the signature list was 3 pages long. Dui carefully placed the sheets in a folder. "This is the valuable part," he said. Ha-an nodded. She looked at the storehouse after the event. Paper cups, cake wrappers, crooked chairs, and a chalkboard full of children's writing. Everything was tiring and imperfect, but alive. She realized that home was not only a place with walls and a roof. Home was the place where, when one was pushed out, someone still moved a chair so one could sit again. That night, Mrs. Lamb ate half a bowl of porridge. She asked how the reading night had gone. Ha-an spoke for a long time, telling her about the fish seller's crumpled donation, Little T's mistakes, and Kang's arrival. Her grandmother listened and gave a weak smile. "If your father were here, he would be happy," she said. Ha-an looked at her father's photograph, and for the first time she did not feel she was merely standing in his shadow. She had not reopened the class to become like him, nor was she protecting the landing only because of his last words. She was doing it because while struggling to stand, she had found a part of her own life that wanted to give something to others, and that part could not be bought with an engagement offering.
Chapter 6. The Woman with White Lilies. 2 days after the reading night, Kang's mother came to visit. Mrs. Tran Tan Nhan was not like the rich women Ha-an had imagined. She wore a pale gray silk blouse, her hair pinned low, and held a bouquet of white lilies wrapped in newspaper. She arrived quietly, without a car following behind, and simply stood at Ha-an's gate, asking after Mrs. Lam. Ha-an hesitated, but still invited her in. Mrs. Nhan placed the flowers on the altar for Ha-an's father, lit incense, and prayed very softly. The gesture made Ha-an more cautious than moved. People from the Tran family rarely did anything without a reason. Yet Mrs. Nhan looked at her father's photograph for so long that the room grew heavy with a different silence. When they went out to the yard, Mrs. Nhan said she had once attended Ha-an's father's literacy class. She had been a poor girl and had married Mr. V when he still hired himself out to run boats, before he learned how to turn riverside land into money. "Your father was the first person who told me to sign my own name neatly," she said. Ha-an was surprised, though she did not show it. Mrs. Nhan did not apologize for her husband or defend her son. She only said there were debts in the Tran family that were not written on paper. Mr. V had once received help from many people, and the richer he became, the more afraid he was of being reminded that he had needed others. That was why he hated the old ferry landing. It was not only land, it was a memory that he had not built his life alone. Ha-an asked whether she had come to persuade her to sign the papers or to tell old stories. Mrs. Nhan smiled sadly. "I came to say that Kang does not know everything. He grew up after our family already had everything, so he believes everything can be bought at the right price. But he is not so bad that he cannot wake up." Ha-an did not answer. To her, whether Kang woke up mattered less than the fact that he had used power to pressure her. Mrs. Nhan understood that look. From her handbag she took an old photograph. Ha-an's father standing in front of a class, beside him a young woman holding a notebook. "I cannot openly oppose my husband, but if there is a village meeting, I will not lie." It was not a grand promise, but it was a crack in the Tran wall. News of Mrs. Nhan's visit spread as quickly as news of the rejected engagement gifts. Some said she had pity, others said the Tran family was changing tactics. Ha-an tried not to let rumors affect her, but she began to see that everything was more complicated than good people and bad people. Mr. V was the one pressing the debt, but he had once been poor. Kang was arrogant, but perhaps he had been taught that winning meant never letting anyone refuse him. Mrs. Nhan had kept silent for many years, yet she had kept the old photograph. That complexity did not make wrongdoing lighter. It only reminded Ha-an that if she wanted to change her life, she could not become a copy of those who judged others with a single label.
The commune meeting was set for Monday morning. The night before, the storehouse lights stayed on until late. Dewey arranged the documents in chronological order, Mai phoned everyone who had signed to remind them, and Fook checked the projector borrowed from the school. Ha-an practiced her presentation, but each time she reached the part about the debt, her voice caught. She was angry at herself for still being afraid. Dewey said fear was not weakness. It became dangerous only when one let it choose the final sentence. He told her that when he first went to the city, he had dropped out for a semester because he thought he did not belong there. If her father's letter had not reached him, he might have returned home in shame. Teacher Locke did not save me with money, Dewey said. He saved me by making me believe I still had one more attempt. Ha-an asked why Dewey had not come back sooner. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, wind knocked tamarind leaves onto the tin roof. Because I was afraid to look at the place I owed and not know how to repay it, he answered. The city gave me work, salary, business cards. But every time someone mentioned Bing Hua, I remembered the wooden desk Teacher Locke placed by the window. I thought sending money home was enough. Only when I heard the class had been locked did I understand that some debts cannot be transferred by bank account. Ha-an looked at him, and for the first time saw beneath his calmness a person also trying to redeem a part of life he had left behind. The next morning, before leaving for the meeting, Mrs. Lam called Ha-an over. She gave her an old handkerchief embroidered with her mother's name. "Take this with you," she said, "not to wipe tears, but to remember that our family once had many people who stood up right." Ha-an tucked it into her pocket. Mrs. Lam was too tired to attend, but her eyes were brighter than they had been in days. Ha-an suddenly understood that the old did not need only medicine. They needed to see those who came after them not be broken by the things that had once forced them into silence. She bent down and held her grandmother. This time she did not apologize for refusing the engagement offering. She only said, "I am going to take back Father's words." On the road to the commune office, the sky was gray, warning of heavy rain. Villagers walked in small groups. Some carried hats, some old papers, and some came empty-handed because they wanted to listen. Mr. V had arrived early, sitting beside the commune officials. His dark suit made the meeting room feel smaller. Kong stood behind his father, his face tense. Mrs. Nyan sat in the last row, pressing a white handkerchief in her hands. Ha-an entered with Dewey and Mai, the file bag heavy in her arms. Her heart beat quickly, but her steps did not slow. The 30 days were not over, but perhaps her life had already crossed the longest day.
Chapter 7. The Meeting in the Rain. The meeting began with the commune chairman's even voice. He said this was a session to clarify the petition concerning the old ferry landing and asked all sides to remain calm and keep order. The administrative language made everything seem smaller, as if the dispute were only a few meters of land and a few lines of zoning. But when Ha-an looked around, she saw people who had studied there, sheltered there during floods, and once brought their children across the ferry there. A place, when called by its land lot code, could turn into property. When called by memory, it became part of a shared life again. She reminded herself to speak so that both names could be present. Mr. V presented first. He said his family had lent Mrs. Lam money for many years, with a contract, interest, and an agreement for handling assets if payment became overdue. He said the floating restaurant project would create jobs, improve the commune's appearance, and attract tourists. He did not forget to praise Ha-an for caring about children, but said goodwill had to be placed properly and could not obstruct development. His words were so smooth that a few people nodded out of habit. Ha-an listened, feeling cold along her spine. The danger of a man like him did not lie in blatant lies. It lay in his ability to mix a portion of truth with a portion of benefit until it tasted right to the crowd. When it was her turn, Ha-an stood. Her hands shook, so Dewey set the papers gently on the lectern to keep her from dropping them. She did not begin with accusation, but with the history of the ferry landing. Who contributed land? Who contributed labor? Why the storehouse was built, and why it remained as a class and flood shelter after the bridge was completed. She presented the meeting record, the map, the old photograph, and the signature list. She spoke slowly, stumbling at times, but she did not avoid anything. When she mentioned the debt, she admitted her family had borrowed money, but asked that the interest, the compensation already paid, and the use of community property as a condition for private transfer all be clarified. The room grew quieter. Truth, when placed in the right order, began to gain weight. Mr. Ting confirmed the signature and the circumstances under which the record had been made. An old boat owner said Ha-an's father had used the storehouse many times to hold relief rice during flood seasons.
Miss Ha said the evening class now had 21 students, 8 of whom were at risk of dropping out. Their words had no theatrical tone, which made them harder to deny. Mr. V remained calm, but his fingers tapped the table faster. He asked whether the old record still had legal force, whether the commune had officially recognized the activity point, and where Ha-an would find money to maintain it. The correct questions struck real weaknesses. Ha-an did not dodge. If the commune has not recognized it, today we ask for consideration. If maintenance needs money, we will disclose income and expenses and mobilize support. But the absence of a decision does not mean anyone has the right to erase it.
Kong suddenly stood. He said Ha-an was using community emotion to avoid debt. His words were sharp, but not as certain as his father's. Ha-an looked straight at him. I am not avoiding the debt. I refuse to let a debt be used to take something that does not belong only to my family. Kong was about to answer, but Mrs. Nyan spoke from the back of the room. Her voice was not loud, yet everyone turned. She said she had studied in the old class, that Mr. V had known about the community use clause for years, and that the engagement offering had indeed been used to pressure Ha-an into exchanging marriage for debt relief, even if it was not written in the contract. The room went silent as if the air had been pulled out. Mr. V spun around, and for the first time his eyes lost control. Rain poured down just as the meeting reached its tightest point. It struck the commune office roof in dense, heavy sheets. A land officer was called to examine the file and admitted that the old ferry landing had a public use note on an older map, though it had not been clearly updated in the new system. The commune chairman ordered all transactions related to the land temporarily suspended pending review and formed a team to inspect the debt and the source of compensation. This was not a final ruling, but it was enough to stop Mr. V from using his paper to drive people out immediately. Ha-an heard the decision and her mind went blank. She did not feel joy, only that her legs had gone weak. Sometimes winning one step does not feel like cheering. It feels like finally breathing after holding one's breath too long. After the meeting, Mr. V passed by Ha-an. He said very quietly, "You think a few people on your side are enough? You do not know what loss is." Ha-an looked at him and found she was no longer as afraid, perhaps because he had just revealed his anger, and anger made him look more human, less like a wall. She answered, "I have known loss since I was 16. That is why I do not want to lose anything else by abandoning it myself." Mr. V said nothing more. Kong stood a few steps away and heard it, his face pale. Mrs. Nyan left the room silently, and no one stopped her. A wealthy family can also crack apart. The sound is simply hidden behind higher walls. The rain was still heavy when Ha-an returned to the ferry landing. The river had risen quickly, carrying water hyacinth and trash. One corner of the storehouse was wet. The children had been sent home, but Mai and Fook were covering the books with tarps. Dwi set the files on a high shelf and looked toward the river. "Flood season is early," he said. Ha-an nodded. The meeting had temporarily protected the land, but nature did not care about human paperwork. It came in its own way, fair and cold. When the commune loudspeaker announced a high tide warning, Ha-an understood that the old ferry landing was about to prove its value not by words, but by opening its doors to those who needed shelter.
Chapter 8. The Night the Water Rose. The water began rising in the afternoon and did not stop when night fell. By 8 o'clock, the low road in front of the market was over ankle deep. By 10, water had entered the storehouse yard. Ha-an, Dwi, Mai, and Fook lifted books onto high tables, pulled electric cords off the floor, and cleared space for people to shelter. The commune loudspeaker reported that part of the embankment in Som Khan had broken, and several households had to move immediately in the night. The old ferry landing, once called Abandoned Land, became one of the few bright places still wide enough and close enough to the main road. Ha-an had no time to be afraid. She assigned tasks as if she had been doing this for years. Mai handled drinking water, Fook handled motorbikes, Dwi made the list, and she went with the local militia to bring in the elderly. Rain struck her face hard enough to hurt. The village road had become a muddy current, and every step had to be tested. Holding a flashlight, Ha-an led old Mrs. Tu from a house flooded to the knees toward the boat. The woman kept insisting on going back for a box of ancestral photographs, so Ha-an waded in with her, lifted the box above her head, and guided her out. By the time they reached the landing, the storehouse was crowded. Children cried, dogs barked, and adults called to one another to check belongings. Neighbors had brought Mrs. Lamb, who sat in a dry corner with her eyes fixed on her granddaughter. In the midst of chaos, Ha-an understood what her father had known.
A public roof did not need to be beautiful, it only needed to open at the right time. At midnight, Kang arrived. He came not in his car, but in a pickup truck carrying boxes of instant noodles, bottled water, and raincoats. His face was soaked, his hair stuck to his forehead, and the polished look he usually wore was gone. Ha-an was surprised, but did not ask. He said his mother had learned the storehouse was taking in evacuees, so she had gathered supplies from their home. Dwi helped him unload. In the sound of the rain, two men who had once stood on opposite sides of a file now lifted the same box of water. That sight did not erase what had happened, but it made the flood night less simple. Some people only realize when water reaches their own door that their floor is not much higher than anyone else's. At near 2 in the morning, bad news arrived. Nok was missing. Her mother thought the girl had followed a neighbor group to the storehouse, but she was not on the list. Her house was beside a canal, and the current was strong. Ha-an did not hesitate. She grabbed a life jacket, while Dwi and Kang joined the local militia. The road into Som Khan was black except for flashlight beams, cutting trembling lines through the rain. They called Nok's name over the sound of water hitting tin walls, and people shouting as they held ropes. Ha-an was so afraid her legs wanted to give way, but the image of Nok reading about her dream of becoming a nurse kept pulling her forward. A class meant nothing if the person who opened it left a student behind in the rising water.
They found Nok in the loft of a neighbor's house, holding her little brother, while both had fallen asleep from exhaustion. The water had nearly reached the stairs. As Dwi carried the younger child down, a sheet of tin wall was torn loose by the current and scraped his arm. Kang rushed to hold the rope and nearly slipped. Ha-an held Nok, feeling the small body shake violently inside the raincoat. Only after they got both children onto the boat did she notice her own hand bleeding where it had struck the edge of a door. No one said anything. In moments like that, thanks and blame both become small. There is only breath, and the fact that 2 more children are alive. When they returned to the landing, dawn was close. People in the storehouse made room for Nok and her brother to lie near Mrs. Lamb. Kang sat under the eaves, staring at his blistered hands from pulling the rope. Ha-an handed him a bottle of water. He took it, stayed silent for a long while, then said, "I did not know this place had been used as a flood shelter." Ha-an answered, "You did not ask." The sentence made him lower his head. After a moment, he said quietly, "I also did not know the engagement ceremony was used to pressure you that much. I thought it was an agreement between both sides." Ha-an watched the rain thinning in the yard. "Not knowing does not make what was done disappear," she said. "But if you truly did not know, you still have a choice after you learn." In the morning, the water had not gone down, but the rain had stopped. The storehouse was messy, its floor muddy, people sleeping propped against one another. Dwi's arm was bandaged, Mai's voice was hoarse, and Fook had fallen asleep on a rice sack. Ha-an stood at the door, watching gray light settle on exhausted faces. She saw Mr. V approaching from a distance, his leather shoes stained with mud, several people behind him bringing more relief supplies. He stopped before the storehouse door and looked inside, his expression unreadable. Ha-an did not step out to welcome him, nor did she chase him away. The night of rising water had placed everyone in the same doorway. Whether a person crossed it with sincerity or calculation, time would sort out the difference. After the flood, the district newspaper ran a story about the ferry landing shelter. The photo of Ha-an carrying Nok had been taken in a haste, her face smudged, hair stuck to her cheek. She disliked the attention, but the news changed the direction of the land story. People no longer asked only who owed whom. They asked where villagers would shelter next flood season if the landing were sold. The commune received the petition for recognizing the community activity point with more signatures than before. Ha-an knew public opinion could turn like wind, but she also knew some doors only open when people see a place's real use. Her father had called it a place for those without a road. The night before, that line had stopped being words in a notebook.
Chapter 9. The Contract in Red Ink. After the flood, Mr. V stayed silent for 3 days. That silence worried Ha-an more than his threats. A man used to controlling the game would not quit because of one district newspaper article. Just as she expected, on the 4th day, his lawyer sent a letter demanding that Mrs. Lamb repay the debt and objecting to recognition of the community point because the land was under dispute. This time, however, Ha-an was not reading the letter alone. Dwi contacted a free legal aid group in the city. Miss Ha helped draft a petition, Mr. Tin wrote a statement, and Kang unexpectedly texted asking to meet privately. The message contained only one sentence: "I have something you need to see." Ha-an looked at the screen for a long time before replying. They met at a cafe beside the new bridge. Kang did not come with a challenging expression. He placed on the table a photocopy of an old debt contract with many lines corrected in red ink. He said he had found it in his mother's side safe after Mrs. Nyan argued with Mr. V. This copy differed from the version Uncle Sao Tom had given them. The interest rate was lower, the collateral was only the garden behind the house, and the ferry landing was not included. The appendix expanding the collateral had been added later, and Mrs. Lamb's signature appeared to be scanned from an earlier page. Ha'an's hands went cold as she listened. She asked why he was giving it to her. Kang looked at his coffee and answered, "Because I thought I was winning against a stubborn person. Now I see I may have been standing inside a fraud." Ha'an did not thank him right away. She asked whether he understood what handing over the paper meant. Kang gave a tired laugh. "Yes, it means my father will see me as a traitor. It means I have to admit I was foolish in my own house." The bitterness in his voice did not make Ha'an fully soften, but it showed her he was paying a real price. She accepted the photocopy and asked him to testify if necessary. Kang fell silent. Part of him still wanted to stop at discreet help and keep his dignity. Ha'an did not force him. She only said, "You once told me I would regret making you lose face. Maybe now you must decide whether face matters more or truth does." That evening, an urgent meeting was held in the storehouse. Dewey examined the contract and said they needed handwriting verification and the original source, but the photocopy was enough to request a temporary suspension of debt collection. Mai slapped the table in joy. Fook wanted to march to Mr. V's house and demand answers. Ha'an stopped him. She had learned that anger without method becomes a gift to the opponent. They made a task list: submit a petition to the district, request confirmation of medical records and loan history, invite a lawyer to work with them, and preserve copies in several places. Dewey suggested scanning all documents online. Ha'an looked at the pile of papers and saw that the days of lowering her head to copy documents, request stamps, and wait in hallways had finally formed a road they could follow.
Mrs. Lamb went still when she heard the news. She remembered the day she signed the loan paper, worried about surgery, her eyes blurry from crying, while Mr. V said it was only a procedure for help. "It was my fault," she said. Ha'an knelt before her. "The person who took advantage of you when you were weak is at fault." Mrs. Lamb shook her head. "But the weak must also learn to guard their own hands." It was not self-blame, but a lesson passed on. Ha'an held her grandmother's hand and saw blue veins raised like roots. Her family had paid a price for trusting kind words without documents. She did not want her life to end in hating everyone. She only wanted trust, from now on, to keep its eyes open. Mr. V responded by calling Kang home and blocking his bank cards. The news came through a short message from Mrs. Nyan to Ha'an. "He chose to tell the truth. Be careful." The next day, Kang went to the commune office and submitted a statement. He did not polish his image. He admitted he had helped pressure Ha'an, had brought the transfer contract to her, and failed to check the file because he trusted his father. His testimony did not make him good in her eyes, but it made him responsible for his part of the wrong. Perhaps making amends is not asking to be forgiven. It is standing where it disadvantages you, because the truth needs one more person beside it. The district formed an inspection team. Uncle Sao Tom was summoned to work with them, his face pale and nothing like the gold-ringed confidence he once displayed. The contracts were compared, the signature was sent for verification, and the land file was ordered to remain unchanged. Mr. V still hired lawyers, still said he had been misunderstood, still claimed subordinates had handled the procedures, but his power began to crack because too many people had seen different versions of the same truth. At the market, people stopped saying Ha'an was arrogant. They began saying even rich families could one day reveal bad papers. Ha'an did not like the delight in that talk. She only felt tired, like someone who had walked through mud so long that even seeing the bank could not make her believe her feet were clean. In the middle of the tension, the class stayed open. The children did not understand all the contract matters. They only knew Teacher An had dark circles under her eyes, but still checked their homework. One evening, Noak gave her a roughly folded paper flower. On one petal it was written, "Teacher, please do not stop." Ha'an laughed, then almost cried. She realized she continued not to defeat Mr. V, not to prove that refusing the engagement offering had been right, but so these children could see adults make mistakes, feel fear, be pressured, and still find a way to repair the road. If she quit after lighting the lamp, the darkness would be thicker than before.
Chapter 10. Exam Season and Flood Season. The following month, the water receded and exam season arrived. Binghua smelled of dried mud, rotting straw, and new books laid in the sun. The ferry landing storehouse was scrubbed clean, its walls whitewashed with donated money, and the old blackboard replaced by a whiteboard sent by a benefactor after reading the news article. Ha-an no longer counted every glance at the market. More people greeted her now, but she understood that this new respect would need time to become sincere. More important was that the class had a clear schedule, public accounts, and parents taking turns on duty. Jui called it a small community institution. Mai said that sounded too grand, and that they should just call it the storehouse that breathes. T and Ngok prepared for their final exams. Ha-an tutored them until night, patient with every spelling error and every wrong multiplication. Sometimes, as she watched them bend over their papers, she remembered herself at 16, after her father's funeral, when she had planned to leave school and work. If Miss Ha had not come to her house and pulled her back to class, she might never have learned how to read a contract, write a petition, or stand before a meeting and present. A chance to study can be so small that the giver forgets it, while the receiver carries it for life. So what she was doing at the ferry landing was not vague gratitude. It was how she returned a bridge someone had once built for her. The relationship between Ha-an and Jui changed slowly and without noise. He did not confess love in the rain or promise to stay forever. He simply kept appearing, repairing the printer, teaching children to use the computer, bringing back confusing forms and translating them into ordinary language. One evening, Ha-an asked whether he regretted his city job. Jui said he still worked remotely part-time, but wanted to give at least 1 year to the ferry landing project. "And after 1 year?" she asked. He smiled. "Then we see whether this place still needs me, and whether I still have enough courage to stay." The answer was not romantic, but it was true. Ha-an now valued truth more than pretty words. Kang left the Tran house for a while. He rented a room in town and worked as a manager for a friend's small transport company. Once, he visited the class, carrying several used desks and chairs. The children were still afraid of him because they remembered the day he brought the documents, but Ha-an said they could accept the furniture if there was a clear receipt. Kang laughed when he heard that. "You really never miss a chance to teach people about paperwork," he said. Ha-an answered, "You are the most difficult student." Between them there was no love and no pure hatred left. There was a distance held in place by bad memories and a few corrective actions. Sometimes that is already civilized enough.
The final signature verification report arrived. The appendix expanding the collateral was fake. The interest had been miscalculated, and the old compensation for rice field land had already been deducted from much of the principal. The remaining sum was much smaller, still not easy to pay, but no longer a noose. More importantly, the storehouse and the path down to the landing were temporarily recognized as a community activity point while procedures were completed. Mr. V was fined administratively and continued to be investigated for falsifying documents, though he still tried to reduce his responsibility. When Ha-an heard the news, she did not feel as happy as she had imagined. She only sat down and exhaled for a long time. When fear has stretched on too long, its ending is not fireworks. It is the body's silence after it no longer has to brace. Mrs. Lam grew stronger after receiving proper treatment. Most of the medicine money came from the post-flood support fund and a small no-interest loan from the Women's Union, this time with a clear contract and clear witnesses. She often sat in front of the storehouse watching children study, her eyes cloudy but joyful. One day she told Ha-an, "I used to think a girl's best life was a quiet one. Now I see that too much quiet sometimes just means standing still while others put burdens on your shoulders." Ha-an smiled and leaned her head against her grandmother's shoulder. She did not blame Mrs. Lam for the years of endurance. Each generation has its own way of surviving. The fortunate thing is that those who come after sometimes can live differently without denying those before them. Exam season ended with results that were not dazzling, but still worthy of a storehouse celebration. T had raised his math score from a 4 to a 7. Ngok earned a good student mark and wrote the word dream correctly with all its tones. Mai made the whole class clap as if they had won a national prize. Fook roasted corn in the yard, and Dwi projected a cartoon using a borrowed projector. Ha-an stood by the door, watching light fall onto the river. The new bridge glowed white in the distance, and vehicles crossed without needing the ferry anymore. But on this side, an old landing still drew people, not to cross the river by boat, but to cross a difficult stretch of life. The thought made the past months feel more valuable than any red envelope ever placed on her table. Late that night, Kang sent a message. "My father wants to meet you." Ha-an looked at the screen and felt her heart settle. She thought she would be angry, that she would refuse at once. Then she remembered her grandmother's words, "If you refused, live worthy of that refusal." Living worthily did not mean avoiding every difficult meeting. She replied, "At the ferry landing.
Dwi and a commune representative must be present. No more private conversations in the dark, no more side agreements. If Mr. V wanted to speak, he had to speak in the place he had once wanted to take, before the people to whom it belonged. Ha-an set the phone down and listened to the river flow evenly through the night. She did not know how the meeting would go, but this time she would not go alone. Chapter 11. The day the offering returned. Mr. V came to the ferry landing on an afternoon with little son. He looked thinner after the weeks of investigation, the gray at his temples more visible. There was no line of cars, no lawyer, only Hang accompanying him and Mrs. Nyan standing some distance away beneath the tamarind tree. A commune representative, Mr. Ting, Miss Ha, Dwi, and Mai were all present. Ha-an prepared tea in the storehouse and placed a brand new account book at the center of the table. She did not want to turn the meeting into a trial, but she also would not let it become a vague apology that drifted away. A person who once used papers to bind others had to place his hand on paper when loosening the knot. Mr. V sat and looked around the storehouse. The whiteboard, the bookshelves, the photograph from the flood rescue, the student list, all of them stood like witnesses that did not need to speak. He began with difficulty. He admitted there had been violations in the management of the debt file, agreed to sign a document canceling the false appendix, confirmed that he would not dispute the community activity area, and accepted that the authorities would determine the remaining debt according to law. He did not fully say, "I was wrong." His pride still tried to keep its last piece of clothing. But every word he signed was a portion of power forced back into a frame. Ha-an did not need him to perform the role of a perfectly remorseful man. She needed an enforceable commitment. When the papers were signed, Mr. V unexpectedly took out a small beetle tray. It was not the red ceremonial tray from that day, only an old wooden tray with a few beetle leaves, cut areca nuts, and an envelope containing support money for the class. The room fell silent. He said, "The offering brought before was placed in the wrong place. Today I return part of it to the ferry landing, not for a marriage, but for what I owe this place." Ha-an looked at the tray, and the memory of being cornered in her yard rushed back. She knew that if she accepted carelessly, people would say she had finally taken the Tran family's money. If she refused, the class fund would lose money that could buy books for children. She asked him, "Will this be recorded as a public donation with no conditions attached?" He nodded. She turned to the commune representative and Dwi and had the receipt made immediately. Mai later said that was the moment she wanted to laugh out loud. It was still accepting an offering, but this time the receiver did not bow, and the giver had no right to demand a life in return. Ha-an placed the beetle tray on the temporary altar of the ferry landing, where her father's photograph from the old class stood. She said, "I do not accept this for myself. I accept it for the bookshelf, on the condition that every amount is disclosed." Mr. V looked at her for a long time. Perhaps he saw that the girl who had once made him lose face had turned that loss of face into a discipline he himself now had to follow. Perhaps he also saw that the age of yard-side arrangements was over. Where the lights were on, every offering had to have its proper name. After the meeting, Mrs. Nyan stepped toward Ha-yan. She no longer apologized for her husband. She simply handed Ha-yan an old exercise notebook, saying it was her handwriting book from the days she studied in Ha-yan's father's class. On the first page, in shaky letters, was the sentence, "My name is Chan Tan Nyan." Beneath it, Ha-yan's father had written in red ink, "To write your own name is to begin bearing witness for yourself." Ha-yan traced the words and felt her eyes sting. After so many years, an ordinary lesson in letters had returned at the right moment, like an answer. She understood why her father had recorded so much. He had wanted people to have proof of their own existence, beginning with their names. Hang stayed until the end, helping Fook carry in new bookshelves. He said he would leave his father's business completely for a while. Ha-yan told him he did not need to report her. He smiled. "I know, I said it so I could hear it myself." She nodded. Sometimes people need a witness for promises made to themselves. Hang asked whether he could occasionally teach the children basic English. Ha-yan looked him seriously. "You may, if you arrive on time, do not talk down to them, and agree to let the children grade you." He laughed genuinely, the first time without defensiveness. "Harder than a board meeting," he said. Ha-yan replied, "Here, everyone starts again from the easiest lesson." Official recognition for the ferry landing came at the end of the rainy season. Its full name was long and bureaucratic, Bin Hua Ferry Landing Community Learning and Activity Point. Mai complained it sounded like an office sign, but still hurried to order a new board. On the day they hung it, the whole neighborhood gathered. T and Nok were given the task of pulling down the red cloth. When the words appeared, applause rose beneath the clear sky. Hyan stood beside Mrs. Lum, holding her hand. She remembered that the engagement day had also had red cloth, beetle and areca, and whispering people. But today the red did not cover a trap, it opened a door. The same ritual, with the named person standing in a different place, changed the meaning of life completely. That night, Hyan closed the storehouse late. Dwi stood outside the eaves and handed her a cup of ginger tea. He asked, "Do you feel your life has changed?" She thought for a long time. Her family was still poor, the valid part of the debt still had to be paid, her grandmother was still ill, and she still woke early to work part-time at the photocopy shop. But she was no longer a person priced inside a ceremonial tray. She had work, a community, a file, and a name spoken by many people with respect. "I am not rich," she said, "but the direction has changed." Dwi smiled. On the river, water shimmered under a new moon, flowing past the old landing, as if it did not know it had just witnessed a life turn elsewhere.
Chapter 12. The New Landing. 1 year later, the old ferry landing had a small library. The shelves were built from recycled wood, and every book had a handwritten code. A study schedule hung on the wall: Monday evenings for math, Tuesday for Vietnamese, Wednesday for English, Thursday for reading, and weekends for life skills and parent meetings. Ha-an no longer did everything alone. Mai managed the fund, Dwi handled equipment and programs, Miss Ha advised on teaching, Fook became the person who fixed everything from fans to chairs, and Kang taught English every Sunday afternoon, while the children nicknamed him Teacher Serious. People who had once stood at the edge of the story out of curiosity had become part of its operation. A living place is one that does not depend on a single exhausted person. Ha-an returned to school as well. She enrolled in a distance learning teacher training program, working by day at the photocopy shop, teaching at night, and studying late afterward. Some nights she was so tired she fell asleep over her books and woke to find Mrs. Lum placing a cloth over her shoulders. Her grandmother often told her not to push too hard, but pride showed in her eyes. Ha-an did not dream of becoming a great person. She wanted only enough qualifications to do the work she was already doing more solidly, enough knowledge that no one could dismiss the ferry landing class as spontaneous goodwill. She had learned that if a dream is to last, it needs both feeling and procedure, both fire and foundation. Mr. V rarely appeared. The investigation ended with a suspended sentence for the person who directly forged documents, while Mr. V paid fines and lost many business relationships. Many people said it was too light. Ha-an had once thought so too, but when she saw him one day standing outside the gate looking at the class before quietly leaving, she understood that the greatest punishment for a man like him might be living in a town where everyone knew he no longer decided everything. She did not forgive on behalf of the law, and she did not keep anger like a live coal in her palm. She let him become part of a warning in the lesson about documents, power, and community memory. Mrs. Nyan sometimes came to the library to read to the children. Her voice was slow and a little hoarse, but the children liked her because she told folk tales well. Once, after a reading session, she sat with Ha-an and said that all her life she believed endurance was virtue. Now she saw that sometimes endurance only taught others to keep taking more. Ha-an did not know how to comfort her, so she poured more tea. Two women from opposite sides of an old ceremonial tray sat beside each other, not exactly close, but peaceful. Some relationships do not need to become family or friendship. It is enough that from a place of hurting one another, people learn not to pass the hurt on.
Flood season came again that year, but the ferry landing was better prepared. There were high shelves, rechargeable lamps, a list of households needing support, a medicine cabinet, and boats already on call. When water entered the yard, people did not panic as they had the year before. Children helped move books, parents spread mats, and young people raised tarps. Ha-an stood in the middle of the storehouse holding an old walkie-talkie and suddenly remembered the girl who had trembled while refusing the beetle tray. That girl had not disappeared. She was still inside Ha-an, reminding her how to fear, how to hurt, and what a single no can cost. But beside that girl now stood more people, more skills, more valid papers, and more laughter. A person does not mature because weakness vanishes. A person matures by organizing her weakness into shared strength.
Dewey stayed for more than a year. No one repeated the old question, but the answer lay in the things he did. Renting a small room near the market, bringing more books from the city, building a website for the library, and writing grant applications with Ha'an. The affection between them grew like the mangrove apple trees by the river, roots slow but deep. One evening, after they finished a quarterly report, Dewey asked very quietly whether she wanted to walk with him beyond the project. Ha'an looked at him and saw no shadow of a ceremonial tray, no bargain, only an equal invitation. She answered that she needed time, and he said he had time. That patience made her smile. On the first anniversary of the new sign, the ferry landing held a small book fair. Tie read a new essay, Ngoc taught younger children how to wash their hands and bandage a wound, and Kang was forced to sing an off-key English song that made the whole yard laugh. Mrs. Lime sat in the front row with Ha'an's mother's handkerchief on her lap. Ha'an was invited to speak. She stood before everyone, beneath the sign now slightly faded by the sun, and said that the ferry landing did not belong to the strongest, the richest, or the most eloquent. It belonged to those who needed a place to begin again, and to those willing to keep the door open for whoever came after. She did not mention Mr. Vi or the engagement offering, but everyone who had witnessed it understood. At the end of the day, after everyone had gone home, Ha'an walked down to the edge of the river. The new bridge shone in the distance, while the old landing held only the sound of water tapping wooden stakes. She took out her father's blue notebook. The last pages were still blank. She wrote, "I did not accept the offering. I was afraid. I almost sold everything for the sake of being left in peace. But then I learned that a life does not change with one act of courage. It changes through the days after, when we still choose not to betray ourselves." She paused, listening to the wind through the tamarind trees. From the storehouse, Mai called her in to eat sweet soup. Ha'an closed the notebook and stood. Which side of the river she was on no longer mattered as much as before. What mattered was that this time she had chosen the bank toward which she would walk.
Hey there! If you enjoy our audio content, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with your friends. Most importantly, click subscribe and ring the bell to stay updated with everything Zuzu Audio. Support the channel and join our community today.